Previously on AgentPalmer.com, Palmer's trek continues with Star Trek the Animated Series. The gum thief wears the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia well, and no, this isn't a repeat. Charles is back for a second straight episode to continue the discussion. We talk about the things we enjoy consuming on pixelated screens, sportsmanship, looking back, goals, attention, starving artists, growth, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 96th episode is the return of the DM, the Bard, Yahzick, Chaz, the man, the myth, the legend, Charles Bates. As a quick refresher, Charles is the DM in a series of videos on the YouTube channel Mann Shorts, that's M-A-N-N Shorts. That channel also hosts a series titled Drunk Before Noon and many other videos. If you also enjoyed this conversation, as I hope you enjoyed the last, you should definitely check out his channel. This is an anomaly, not because Charles is back for a second time, but because of what you're about to hear. This episode is the original One Final Question from episode 95, but it was worth keeping as a singular conversation because it's much longer than those questions and answers tend to be, and with the magic of editing, both last episode and this episode still get one final question. The other thing to mention is that in 95 episodes, this is the first time a One Final Question has turned into its own episode. Honestly, it's more of a surprise that it took this long for it to happen. So in the interest of keeping everyone informed, when we talk about earlier, what we really mean is the last episode, episode 95. Though this will stand on its own, and you don't have to have heard that episode to continue on with this one. So what are you going to hear this time? Well, we dissect the parts of media that we enjoy most. We talk about sportsmanship, attention, audience expectations, discover some of our similarities, setting goals, and consider our price. All of that and a whole lot more is coming your way shortly. But first, remember, if you want to discuss this episode as your listener afterwards, you can find all the contact information for Charles and myself in the show notes. You can watch Charles' content on the Mann Shorts channel, that's M-A-N-N, as in youtube.com/manshorts. There you can find the D&D editions, Drunk Before Noon, and the video of his podcast, Bard Advice. You can also listen to his music on YouTube or Spotify by looking up Yahzick, that's Y-A-H-Z-I-C-K. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on AgentPalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, take it away, Chaz.
Do you find yourself enjoying the world more than the plot or more than the characters? Or I guess the real question is, what do you find yourself most attracted to in the story? Is it the characters? Is it the plot? Is it the world? Or is it a combination?
I think I'm in a weird spot with my consuming as a consumer of things. I'm as we record this, I've read through all but 1.5 of Len Dayton's bibliography, which is like 47 books. And
wow.
The last trilogy that I'm in the middle of right now is part of a series of trilogies. So I'm in the right now, I'm in the middle of a world that I have kind of been following
for a while.
Yeah, I've been in for a while, right? And more to the point, I've been in this author for a lot longer than that too. So for this particular thing, it's all of the things, right? But when I generally first pick up a book, I think for me, it's the story first and foremost. Now, obviously, the world has some impact on that, but like, I think it's the story because I'm not, as I said, I don't want to read the back cover. and I don't want to read the inside thing, and I don't want to see the trailer, and I just kind of want to experience it the first time. And because there's so much, I'm pretty much experiencing everything only for one time, right? Like there's so much out there, I don't have time to reread a book. So the story is really the takeaway. And for me, after the story comes the dialogue, because I am in love with great writing. Like, yeah, I've not seen Avatar ever.
Oh, the original.
The original. And so I didn't see the sequel, but then like after a decade, people find out I haven't seen it, and they're like, yeah, but you got to see the majesty of the visuals. And I was like, I'm not a visual person. I'm a story person. And they're like, oh, and this is what happens. Oh, you're a story person. Yeah, I'm a story person. What's the story like? And then they all always say the same thing. You seen Fern Gully? Yes, I have. Well, then you don't need to see Avatar. Like, so,
Yeah. I mean, they're not wrong.
So I don't know. I guess that means that I'm definitely a story guy. and then a dialogue guy, and maybe a character guy, and then like the Flash is like the special effects, like that's I don't I can take it or leave it.
I'm kind of the same. Like I honestly watching a Coen brothers movie is like, the thing about the Coen brothers is that it's like, yeah, it's gonna probably be a really good story, but it's gonna be a lot of exposition to get there, dude. It's gonna be a lot of just like 90-second shots of silence. I think that for me, I'm and I spoke a lot earlier about how I love the world over the story, and that is true in regard to specific things, like with Star Wars, with Harry Potter, even with Marvel. Like I love the world of Marvel, but like I don't really care about whatever your Civil War story is. I don't.
That's fair.
And I also am, but I'd say that first and foremost, I need characters.
Okay.
And so like I'd say that the most glaring example of where it happened recently was my watching through Ted Lasso. Because I think that Ted Lasso is not only a masterclass in just acting by Sudeikis, because I think that he's brilliant, but I think that it's also a masterclass in how you can get people to fall in love with a show that is pretty much carried by one character.
Okay.
Like you could very easily swap in and out or remove entirely pretty much everybody on that show except him, and it would still work. I mean, just the plot is insane. As somebody hires a high school or rather a college football coach to come and coach a soccer team in London. It's insane. Why would anybody ever watch that? But if you watch the first episode, you fall in love with his character in the first 3 minutes of the show, and so you'll follow him anywhere.
So I want to ask you about dialogue for a second, right? Because obviously it's related to characters, but like two of my favorite shows, TV of all time, are West Wing and Gilmore Girls, which have more dialogue per minute or per episode than like any other show out there. And I think as unrealistic as it is for people to talk like that, as a consumer, I just love that every character has a story to tell, even if it's just like, how's your day? Well, 45 seconds of as many words and syllables as I can fit into this, I'm going to answer your question. And I don't know why that speaks to me, aside from the fact that I have a podcast about bringing back long form conversation, and maybe that's kind of where it comes from. But like those kind of shows where like it's dialogue heavy, like, yes, give me more.
Yeah, I'm that way as well. You know, it's funny you mentioned Gilmore Girls. That is Melissa's favorite show, or maybe not her favorite, but it's one of her favorites. And it's for that reason. It's that quick pace. And it's funny too, because if you watch the videos, the Man Shorts editions, they get the dialogue gets quicker over the years. The early episodes, the cuts are so long. There's just so much space. It'll like Lance will say something, and then there's just this pause And like if you just compare the old stuff to like a newer video, it's just gotten faster. And that's just the nature of, I like that too. I prefer to consume stuff like quick and fast. And I think that that's some of the funnier stuff. And it's just like, like I think Frasier did a pretty good job of that too. Like where it would just be like the joke, and then it's like, yes, I can relate to that kind of, I guess, like organized chaos.
Yeah, and I think I don't. Is it even chaos? Like it always seemed so, like I know it's maybe.
Well, it is kind of surgical, I guess.
Oh my God!
Certainly wouldn't call The West Wing chaos. That was like very, surgically put together.
Yeah, I also think that because
it feels chaotic.
I binged all of Man Shorts. I don't know if I noticed as much because it's just a general progression, right? Like I don't.
Yeah.
It's the difference is like when you watch. So, all right, I'm currently in the middle of a Trek journey. I'd never watched Star Trek. And now I am. I started at the beginning.
Original or next gen?
I started from the beginning. Like I watched the original series, I watched the animated series, I watched all the original series movies, and I just started next gen.
Oh, I am so excited for you. Next gen's the best one.
Because I'm
so excited.
But here's the thing. So I'm then going on and doing like all of them. Like I'm
Deep Space and
but the thing is, there's and I know there was some overlap there, but I wanted to do like the original cast and then the next gen cast and kind of like keep it all together. But like, you don't notice necessarily the differences until there's massive jumps, right? Like from the original series and the animated series to a certain extent, kind of similar. Then it jumps when it goes to the big screen. And then when you go from the original cast to next gen, it's vastly different. But because it's an era of television I'm more intimately familiar with than the late 60s, it's just home. Like I know it's Star Trek, but like it's just home. These are I expect the commercial breaks when they come. Like I'm paced. This is what I grew up with. I know where it all is. And now because everything else is basically I've just been watching television for the last 20 years, like I'll get there. But there are things you miss out on by either not having time because you just jump from one to the next or vice versa.
Yeah.
So that's going to be, it's going to be, and it'll be fun. I don't know. I don't know what I got myself into, but at a certain point I was like, I need to watch this.
Yeah. It's I consume a lot of stuff. I've been watching the new season of RuPaul's Drag Race. Oh, and I'll just say a quick note on that. Something that was super cool. I saw what might have been in the last episode, or it wasn't maybe the last one, but the one before. I think it was episode 9 or something. What might have been like the most, like what might have been the best display of sportsmanship I've ever seen.
Okay.
On that show. So essentially you had there were 3 drag queens that were left at the end. They did this lip sync off. So there was a bunch of different lip syncs and then it came down to 3 girls at the end. And 2 of them were like monster lip syncers. Like it wasn't even a question as to whether it would be a good performance. It would just be like, which one of them's better.
Okay.
The third one was like not very experienced with lip syncing. And everyone knows that, right? Like the judges, the contestants, the viewers, everybody knows what time it is. This person is not very good at lip syncing. And so what's going to happen is 2 of them are going to be singing for the final thing. And one of the girls that's one of the strong ones gets the opportunity to choose which of the other 2 to save.
Yeah.
Now she could have saved the other one that was really good and just sent the one girl home knowing that she was weaker. But she didn't do that. She saved the weaker one and then proceeded to beat the other one.
Wow.
In the lip sync. So it was like she did the right thing and then earned the spot. Like what a moment in just sportsmanship in general. Well, like super cool.
It's funny you bring it up because even in real sport, like I'm one of those nerds that crosses everything. Like there's very few sports I won't enjoy watching on my television.
Yeah, I like sports.
But I am always kind of, I don't know what the word is. Disgusted, I think is the word, when like good sportsmanship is the lead on SportsCenter because it happens so rarely. Like, oh, you'll never believe what happened. It's like, oh, people were good. Like somebody acted human and wasn't just trying to kill the other person. And that is now our lead because it happens so rarely. And it's just like, oh, that's... We need to be
that
better.
is true.
We need to be better.
Do you think oh man, I wish my question should have been, do you think Brady's going to stay retired?
I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens with all of his former FTX money, how much he can recoup.
Oh my God, dude. Didn't he say he wants to start stand-up comedy? He's out of his mind. He might stay. He might go to Miami.
I mean, don't forget.
I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ended up on the Dolphins.
Don't forget, Favre retired, came out of retirement and went to the Jets and then got traded to the Vikings before he finally hung it up. Like he legit retired before he went to the Jets and then had his second career. So I feel like it's just, whereas you and I are creators and we can just create a new thing. They've been football players for 30 years. Like
they have to rely on their body.
And that's all they know. They can't, I think you and I can double down on writing, and whatever medium that takes is fine.
Yeah, for sure. We're a lot less limited in like where we can do that. You know, like you can really only go be a pro football player one place. And if you're 45 and your body is 45, because you know that's the thing. A lot of these guys, it's like you might have the ferocity of a 30-year-old, but your body is 45. And it can only go so hard. And there are 20-year-old linebackers waiting to light you up. So, like, I mean, I think that he should just stay out of it. Like, I saw a thing that said Phillip Rivers is looking for a place to play.
Just stay.
And it's like he retired. It's like, what are you doing? Yeah. Just hang it up, man. It's like it was like Kobe, and obviously, you know, rest in peace, Kobe. Obviously, it didn't work out anyway, or rather, I should say, obviously, his life was tragically cut short anyway. But that last contract that Kobe took, I thought was crazy. I was like, what are you doing, dude? If you blow a knee out and then you're not able to walk forever, and for what? For like 50 more mil? Like, it just seems like too much of a risk for too little of a reward, especially when you're into the multi-millions. It's like, what are we even talking about at that point?
Well, it also ends up being this weird thing where it's like, I think the money is the devil saying to keep doing it. Like, I really believe that they're saying, I'm going to walk away. And we, you know, you always have those conversations with like friends like, oh, well, you know, what would you do for $1 million? Well,
right.
These guys have millions. So it's like, I would like to retire. Well, how about we give you $50 million? No, I'd like to retire. How about we give you $100 million? You know, so at a certain point, it's just, that's the conversation, because it's like, but again, you know, where's the humanity from the ownership and the management that's like, let the dude fucking rest, man.
Yeah, but I mean, that is a good way to put it, because I'd not actually considered it that way before. But I guess that is true. Like, it does reach a point where it's like, shoot, if I'm Tom Brady and they're going to give me all that money and all I got to do is one more season, I could do one more season. I'm Tom Brady. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I just feel like, I don't know, at least for me, maybe, and very likely it's just because I had such a different path in life. Like, you know, I'm not a millionaire. I've never been one. And I don't know if I ever probably will be one. Probably not. But that said, like, I don't know. I feel like if I had a couple of million, you might not ever hear from me again. And I would just like live happily ever after. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that I would ever like get like $5 million and then think like, okay, how can I get 10? Like, you've won, you know, like that's, I don't get it about some of these people with all this money that are just like tragedy cases. It's like, what do you do? You won, you got all the money. Well, you won the game of life.
But I think a lot of those people aren't thinking about it in terms of like other things. Like I think it goes back to the artist thing. Like, you and I want to create a thing, and if it brings in a couple million, like, holy shit, like that would be amazing. But
that's not why we make.
But that's not why we make the thing, right? So, like, I think that's a different ball game. because like that, you know, we're look, I would love to do this for money, but I've always said, and it's something that I maintain, and I guess it'd be a good question to ask you, like, I think this would be different if I had to sell it for money. Like the one that lives rent free in my head, and I know people have differing opinions on Chris Hardwick, but mainly because of there was some stuff, Nerdist. He founded Nerdist.
I don't know a lot about him,
but there was an episode of Nerdist after he sold it. Now, Nerdist was his blog and then his podcast, and then he sold it to a conglomerate. The episode where he talks about continuing a podcast under a different name because he no longer owns the thing. It'd be basically like, okay, you and Justin can continue to do what you're doing, but you've sold Mann Shorts and you've got to do it under a new name. He spends 15 minutes by himself on mic, basically crying. He doesn't actually cry, but just talking about how much it means to him and how it was an opportunity he couldn't pass up, but he still did it. And I think about that all the time because, like, yeah, Agent Palmer's just a name. Nobody can stop me from podcasting or blogging. You can't take that away from me. But I could sell the name. Like, what's my price? Like, he obviously found his price. But then again, you're listening to this episode and he I don't know. At a certain point, maybe you don't regret it because there's so much money in it. But like, I think about that episode a lot because he was so emotional about it.
Yeah. I think it depends on like what your goal is with the thing, for one, because like sometimes that is the goal. That's a lot of goal. That's a goal for a lot of those business minded type dudes, right? They just build a business and then sell it and then start a new one. Like, I think that when it comes to like the concept of selling out, or to your point, which I kind of agree with, like there kind of always is a price. Like I don't regret, for the sake of us taking on sponsorships, as to like what kind of, you know, obviously we lost some people and they were upset that it's, you know, technically kind of doubled up on ads because we've got our sponsors and as well as our advertisements on the channel. But it's like, you know, that's what it is. That's how we make the money from it. I will say that, like, I don't know that the regret, at least for me, has been a moral one.
Okay. Well,
I think, and maybe my situation's a little different, but like, I think for me, the dilemma has been more of a feeding the beast thing, where it's like, you know, not that I wouldn't honestly even say that I'm sick of it. It's just that it's like, if it's getting tiring and it's like, okay, I think I want to get off the ride now, but I don't know how to get off the ride because it's this, you know, it's this thing now that people expect and it's part of my income. So it's not something, it's not like I can just drop it, you know? Well, so I think that's any regret with that would just be kind of feeding that financial beast.
Well, here's my question then, because I'm a consumer that is tight on finances. So I'm never going to be the one that complains about you doubling down on doing an ad read and having ads. But I also grew up with terrestrial television where I was used to ads. Like, I don't complain about that because I don't have the money to subscribe to you on YouTube or whatever other platforms, right? Like I could give you $1 on Patreon, but like, as we've kind of all learned, like $1 on Patreon is like 50 cents or whatever. So like, but what I can do is I can sit through and watch the ads. And that's honestly more important than anything. That's the most valuable piece. People all the time are like, what's the best way to get money to you? And it's like, I mean, you could send cash, but like the reality is, like, watching is the most important thing that you could do to help. And like, obviously sharing and commenting and stuff helps the algorithm, liking the videos and stuff. But like, just being there, as like, because I mean, that's what we're selling at the end of the day, right? For the ad space is eyes. Yeah.
That's what ad revenue is. That's what ad space is like, how many people are going to see this?
Yeah.
How many sales can we get from them, Johnny? So it's like, if you're watching, that's the most important contribution that you could give, at least specifically to the advertisements, but I think on the channel as a whole.
So the other question I had was, we talked about like, how things have changed over long periods of time. But have you gone back and watched like early Man Shorts and like early Drunk Before Noons? Like, do you go back and look at the archive on occasion, or?
Sometimes sometimes we'll get a comment on something that's like real old and I'll be like, oh yeah. Some of the stuff I doubt we would make today.
Okay.
I doubt we would make Gangsta today. Just not because I feel ashamed of anything we did in those episodes, by the way. I think that they're hilarious. I just mean that, like, I don't think that we would have chosen to do that today, just because it's like you don't even want to open the door for somebody because unfortunately now we live in a space where there are these people that are just kind of looking for a reason.
Yeah.
And so it's like you don't want to give, they say you give them an inch, they take a mile. I think that's true of like online criticism for sure. It's like if you give and that's maybe one of the reasons I've been so kind of like weary and nervous lately, is because it's like if you give them the smallest opening, not saying that it's likely to happen or even that it will happen, but somebody could come up in there and really blow your spot up on something that you thought was like innocuous, and then it can turn into a real problem.
Well, but you've been open on the channel. You're open in your music, and you were open on the you've done some separate like videos like where I'm at. Which makes you kind of the more, I don't want to call you like the poster child for Man Shorts, but you are the one who did that. Like, you're in all the update videos with Justin, but you also did like, this is where I'm at videos on the channel. And so despite that potential for somebody being like, oh, come on, you baby, you just make videos on the internet. Like, you've still put yourself out there. What was the thought process? Because obviously, there's informing the people that are, the eyeballs, but there's also like, am I being too vulnerable on the internet?
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe the addiction to the attention outweighs the vulnerability.
Do you think you're really addicted to the attention?
Oh, yeah. I made a TikTok the other day where I was like, it's just a little snippet, and it's like, everybody wants attention, I just want it more. Because it's like, I kind of feel that way. Like, and maybe it's a little only child syndrome, and maybe it's just like, I don't know. I've always just, oh yeah. It was the me show always. But I think like, yeah, I think that's really what it is. I think it's that simple. I think that my desire to like, I have stuff to say. And while I think maybe the struggle is that I don't always have a lot of belief or confidence in what I feel, even though I feel it.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't have a problem throwing it out there because I've just always done that. And so sometimes it's like a real, like deep or meaningful or vulnerable thought or moment. But it's just kind of like automatic, I guess, that it just goes out. But then for me, it's usually reactive for me, usually, right? Like, especially like if it's on like my podcast or something, like if it's stream of consciousness, it'll be like, I won't even know until like 3 days or 3 weeks or sometimes 3 months later until somebody puts a comment that's like, yeah, this was, I don't know why you said this. And then it's like,
oh my God, I don't know why I said this.
Something I said 3 months. Yeah, exactly. It's like now I'm like trying to reconcile a thought that I had in 2020. But so I don't know. It's like this weird dichotomy. It's like a tightrope walk of like not giving a shit what people think, and then also like really trying to appease the people that have provided me. And I've been fortunate enough to have created this audience in this lane where I can live in and not have to, work in what I would consider a awful job. I get to work for myself, which is a great opportunity I've been granted. So I do feel like there's a responsibility to the audience as well. Like, just as I think, I'm sure that like Quentin Tarantino and Spielberg and all of those great guys, great directors, like they think that they have a responsibility. I'm sure Quentin considers his audience when he writes.
So I would ask you a question then, as far as, and labels are hard, but they're all we have. Like, you can't just be nebulous. But I would ask you then, would you prefer to be an artist or a storyteller? Because you're both in essence.
Yeah. I think an artist.
Okay.
Just because I feel like there's more storytelling asks more of you as a creator, and it also I think that there's more expectation there as a consumer. But if you're just kind of like an artist, if it's just kind of like there to exist for what it is, there's less pressure, I think.
Okay.
But if you're going to call yourself a storyteller, Stephen King is a storyteller. So it's like, dang, man, like I would much rather be an artist because, Carrot Top's an artist. Like you can, and I shouldn't be mean about Carrot Top. Obviously, he's more successful than me, but I just, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I think that as an artist, you can afford to be a little bit more like the rules don't matter. Whereas I think with storytelling, at least in my experience and the way that I consume stuff, that there's kind of a level of expectation from a storyteller.
See, and here I am thinking like, I like when those rules get broken. So like, look, the rules don't get broken very often, but when they do, I'm the one who stands up and I'm like, yes, this is great. Like, and it kind of goes back to the Star Wars thing where like some of the new trilogy broke some old tropes. And I liked that. Like that's why some of the hardcore fans hated it. But it's exactly the reason I loved it is because like it's different. I didn't want the same thing.
Well, it's the same, but it's different. And that's, I think, too, a part of it is like that's another part of the tightrope that you walk as a creator is that like you want to give your audience familiarity.
Sure.
You want to give them what they already know and love, but at the same time give them something new. Put a bit of a spin on it. And I think that might have something to do with, not that we've been struggling, but we've kind of plateaued in the last year or so, I'd say, in terms of like growth and like, I don't know if the algorithm knocked us out of whack or something, but like we just haven't been getting the kind of views that we were like a year ago. And I think that part of that is because it's just like it's gotten kind of formulaic. And like even as much as the theme and the jokes might change, it is essentially the same show every week. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm excited about like doing this podcast and then doing this new character building thing and the news show, which I don't know if I've told you.
I guess, but I would argue that you got into the wrong mindset. And I say that as someone who keeps reading all these articles about growth and like, thinking to myself, yeah, but there's only so far you can grow. Like I know, like I look and look as a person who lives his life as a blogger that is basically subject to the whims of the Google SEO algorithm, which and every update it's like, oh, this one benefited me and this one not so much, and it all kind of equals out. But like at a certain point, maybe you've peaked, and that's not like that's not. Like, I'm not saying that it's like a sad thing. Like, okay, you're hitting your 50,000 people, and these are your 50,000 people. And you're going to plus and minus 5 for the next 10 years, but these are your 50,000. And I think that, all of the quote-unquote business channels, every one of them, from CNBC and MSNBC and Fox, but all of them are horrible for people because they're always like, well, this company's looking for the next growth. And it's like, well, okay, but if everybody on Earth has Facebook, what's Zuckerberg going to do? Start sending it to Mars? Like, there's only so much you can do. And I think that as creators, we need to kind of think of it on a smaller scale because, like, even if everybody on the planet watched your stuff, that's no guarantee that everybody's going to continue to. So, like, you do have we all have a cap, basically. And I think that we could do better to recognize that for ourselves, because like, I look, I think that, you and I are in different places because this is still only a passion project. And I, if I'm lucky enough to make $10 on all of the things I create, then that's what I make. But like, I've always said, like, I just want to hit the same audience plus one. Like and it's been a slow growth. Like, I remember when I started hitting on average 100 hits a day to the website, and I was like, this is amazing. Oh my God, 100 different people. Because by the time you hit that, you're not staring at the analytics anymore. But I remember being excited for one. oh my God. Yeah.
And I tell people too, like, it's a scale, because it's all relative, because I remember vividly the conversation with my wife when the Man Shorts channel had, like, I don't know, we had like 6,000 followers or something, and I think we earned like $3 or something. And I remember that conversation with my wife of just like, oh, look, it's you adjust and then want more, I guess. It's just like, I don't know, like, it doesn't feel. I remember on my Charlie channel back in the day, 20 years ago or whatever it was now, where like I wanted 100 subscribers. That was what I wanted. And then I ended up getting like thousands overnight because I won that Phil DeFranco contest, but that's a whole nother thing. But I don't know. I guess it's just like, sometimes I talk to people and they're like, whoa, you have all those subscribers. And then other times I talk to people where they're like, oh, well, because, like our agency represents a couple of other creators that are in our space, and some of which do much better numbers than us. And so that's a little humbling too, because it's like, because then on the one hand, it's like I talk to someone like you who is like, well, I'm probably annoying you, complaining, because you're in a position where you're working really hard on this thing and it's still a passion project for you. And the best advice that I would ever have to anybody is to just keep doing it, because it'll just, that's all we've ever done is just organically grown. But it's like some people I talk to and they're like, oh, 170,000.
That's quaint.
Like, come on, man. Like, but then also, like, I remember just dreaming of hitting 10K. I remember just like hoping and praying that we would get 10K. And then like now we have like close to 200. And I almost feel like a bad person because I wish it were 500K,
You want the million,
like,
too.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the big problem with all the money in this place with the millionaires and billionaires. And maybe I didn't know what I was talking about earlier with the 2 million versus 5 million, because it's certainly been the case with subscribers. And if I got $1 million and somebody gave me the opportunity to make 10, I probably wouldn't like immediately say no.
I guess
probably hear them out.
Well, that's fair. I guess the other piece to it is, and like I talked about, and I continue to bring up Minecraft because it's the content I consume the most often, because they're collectives, right? And first of all, I'm jealous of them, and I'm jealous of you because like this is the only collaboration I get. Like, so when I watch a bunch of Minecraft creators on a server where they're like, oh, there's 10 other people here, like I can hang out with whoever. And like you have Justin and the rest of the cast and crew where like you can collaborate a bit. Like even if the writing is done by yourself, there's something else. Like this is it. This is what I have. And I'm fairly jealous of that. But I think the other piece is if you just keep doing it, like, that's great. But I bring it back to Minecraft because I saw in the last 3 years a lot of creators just step away because the burnout was so much. Like, these are people that are bigger than the two of us by a factor of a lot.
Oh, yeah. These streamers, I imagine they get burned out. Some of those people are on there all day, like 4 or 5 days a week.
And even the ones that just do straight up edited video, which, by the way, also not easy because you're turning.
Also 8 hours a day.
Yeah, right. And so it's no wonder they get burnt out. But at a certain point, like, I talk to creators all the time, and I've never talked to anybody that. I don't know. It's got to be a drive thing, right? Because I sit here, and even you to an extent, like there's still passions. Like, yeah, you're bringing in money, but it's still a passion. You're not driven to burn yourself out, or it's just part of who we are and where we've been in our lives, where we're like, I'm going to make sure I try not to completely implode.
Yeah, most definitely. I think it might be like, as we talked about before, like a little bit of a combination of the fear of success thing, but then also like there's a part of me that doesn't want to turn into one of those people.
Okay.
And I've seen it happen to more and more people over the years. And most recently, the more recent example would be like a Joe Rogan, where it's like, bro, as soon as he signed that $100 million Spotify contract, he's a different person. Like he's just a different thing entirely now. Like $100 million.
Yeah.
Like I can't even begin to think of how I could spend that money in a lifetime. It's just so much. And so I think that I think that there's a part of me that like doesn't want to become so wealthy that I become out of touch. And maybe that's the artist in me, because I feel like, you know, the starving artist is still alive, even in those people like The Rock and Kevin Hart, you know, like those kind of like uber successful, but also really, really rich people, that it's like even through all of the wealth and bullshit and maintaining and making a deal with the devil and et cetera, whether the starving artist is there doesn't really have a bearing on all of that, I guess. Like, well, the starving artist can still exist in there.
Oh, I think you look at some of those people you mentioned, and they have their mansions, but they spend a lot of time on the road and a lot of time on the next project, right? I think that's where you can see, like, okay, he's comfortable and he could hang it up. I think wrestling's kind of a similar background, right? Like I haven't watched wrestling in a very long time, but I was a big fan of wrestling during the Attitude Era.
Oh yeah, man.
And I was also a big fan of like Chris Jericho is one of my favorites.
Yeah, he's also, dude, I love Jericho.
He's also
Armbar.
He's also the lead singer of Fozzy, which is not like a horrible like hard rock band. He could step away from the squared circle whenever he wanted to and just tour as a frontman for a rock band.
Yeah.
And yet he still does all of like this is where I think the starving artist comes in, because he has the millions, and he could be a wrestler or a rock star, but he chooses to continue to do both. And it's like, that's the heart of the dog, and then the dog in the fight, and like it's all the cliches, because like otherwise, like why would you keep doing it?
Yeah.
And The Rock goes from project to project to project to project, and he bought the XFL, and he's doing like he always like, and I think, well, in a different space, because it's not necessarily all art, but at a certain point you're just out to prove something, or to tell a story, or to create a new thing. And some of those people, regardless of the paycheck or how much money, will just keep going.
Yeah. And I think it's also like, it's just a matter of like humans wanting to share themselves with other humans and doing that in the most effective way possible. Right? Like some people do that by using their bodies, like athletes. And then some people do that like using their humor or their brains, like you and I. Yeah. Or like there's just or somebody like The Rock is like, you know, obviously like through his physical body, but then also just through like his general leadership skills, his presence, I'm sure, is very effective in business. And like any of the brand deals that he does, he's very like charming, so he can do advertisements and stuff. Like, but at the end of the day, you're buying him. And that's kind of how I feel like with like the hat, with the names of the hat thing with me, with all the names, is that it's like, I don't really care what you call me, because if you're calling me one of those things, then you're paying attention to what I'm doing, which is kind of the goal anyway. So it's like some people like me because some people only like me because of the Yahzick stuff. It's like, that's it. That's all they want to do is hear rap from me. And then some people don't care about the music at all, and all they want is D&D content. And then now I've got this subset of people who just are there for the podcast. So it's like, yeah, it's just a matter of sharing yourself with another human. And I've been grateful to have shared this time with you this evening, because this has been a cool conversation.
quite a bit contained in this episode, but I have to say, this was just fun. This conversation was an adventure in itself, and not for nothing, but it does mark the first episode of the Palmer Files that was started by a question from the guest. Now, Charles is not only a returning guest, he's the first to get back-to-back episodes, but you do this kind of show for long enough and you learn to roll with everything, in this case, a double recording. Why does it work? It works for me because I enjoy listening to my guests as much as I enjoy talking to them. And I could argue the same is true about the shows I enjoy. I like the consuming, the listening, the watching. There's a concentration level to focus on things you enjoy that's very different from what you encounter when you're passively consuming things. As such, this podcast and conversations like the one you just heard me have with Charles are great for my own personal well-being because, well, it should be. If you listen to this show, you should take the time to have a conversation with others around you and concentrate on what they are saying, not just passively wait until you can open your mouth next. That's not a conversation. That's you ignoring the other person for your own benefit. Don't do that. Stop that. Listen to what other people have to say. They may just surprise you. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 96. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact myself and my guest Charles Bates in the show notes. There you can find the links to watch Charles' content on the Mann Shorts channel. That's MANN, as in youtube.com/manshorts. There you can also find the D&D editions, Drunk Before Noon, and the video of his podcast, Bard Advice. You can also listen to his music on YouTube or Spotify by looking up Yahzick, that's YAHZICK. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com, and remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Charles, do you have one final question for me?
What is your favorite, or I guess should say fondest memories with video game from when we were kids? I say we because we're relatively in the same age, certainly the same generation. So what was your favorite kind of thing to go to? What was your go-to kind of game back then?
It's the same old story for me every time. I asked for a Nintendo and I got an IBM PC. Okay, so right off the bat, like if it's my go-to, right, it's going to be a PC game because all of my NES was at a friend's house and only sharing the remote. But for me, really, you fast forward through all the PC gaming and the Civilization and that early stuff into 1997 when I'm working at every middle/high school geek's dream job of a magic card store that has 3 networked computers where we played Quake, Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness, and Diablo, right? And so for me, it's Quake 1 in deathmatch mode. That's my go-to video game jam, followed by Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness, and then Diablo. But those are the top 3. Like, as far as classic, go back, play video games, that's what I think of. And it's because I asked for a Nintendo, and I got a PC, and I didn't get my first console until I bought myself a GameCube in 2001. So,
so you missed the 64 too.
I mean, again, with other people, like at other people's houses or hanging out with other people.
Right.
And the same is true of the PlayStation and the Dreamcast. Like I remember playing Tekken and like all that kind of stuff with other people at their house. But like for me, it's not until I buy the GameCube that I get my own console. Otherwise, it's like all PC.
That's so interesting because I was the opposite. When I was a kid, well, I was fortunate as a child for not ever wanting and also having lots of nice stuff and having systems and stuff. And I had a 64. I didn't fall in love with PC gaming until later in life, until like 2011. Like in my early to mid 20s, I was up in Michigan with my buddy, and Skyrim came out.
Okay.
And so I played Skyrim on PC for the first time. And while I was doing it, I discovered how easy lockpicking was. And I was like, oh my gosh, why is lockpicking so easy? And he's like, oh, because it's on PC. And so I was like, oh. So now I exclusively PC game.
Okay.
But for my childhood, it was pretty much a Nintendo house. Although I did have a PlayStation 2 that I played to death. But yeah, that's so funny. It's like just backwards. It was like I was playing consoles mostly as a kid, and then now I play PC.
Yeah, no, I went back, right? At a certain point, I bought a PS2, and like I went back and I played a bunch of stuff that I missed. But like, yeah, for me, like for my formative gaming, it was literally Quake and like, I'm going to put you in a spot, okay? My go-to CD for playing Deathmatch was Prodigy's Fat of the Land, which pairs so well with Quake. I like, no offense to Trent Reznor, who actually did the score for Quake. Fat of the Land is an amazing Deathmatch soundtrack.
Yeah, I can imagine so.